What do we do when we want to create a product using an RPG system someone else owns? Normally, we would have to involve lawyers and agreements and negotiation and go back and forth on fees. It's a lot of work. But fortunately, today, you can use something called an open license, available for many role playing game systems. The most famous of those is the Open Gaming License for Dungeons and Dragons. Today, we're going to talk about the Open Gaming License, or OGL, what it is, how to use it, why to use it, and why not to use it, and licenses like it. Then, we're going to look in part 2 at the Creative Commons, a different option for licensing. All today on Success in RPGs. So let's start with talking about what an open license is. An open license is a contract that anyone can use. You can find the licenses online where the companies make it available for anyone to use just by grabbing it, downloading it, and following the rules that are inside of it. Follow the rules, you can use the license. And the license grants you some amount of intellectual property that they have, copyrighted material that is theirs, to use in your creations. And you can do that commercially. You can make money off of the product, off of the intellectual property that you're using. There are a number of examples that we can look at. So, for example, Dungeons & Dragons is super well known for its open gaming license, probably the most popular ones out there. There are SRDs, or documents that contain rules you can use, for 3rd edition, 5th edition, and the company's saying they're going to add more. Fate is very well known for having had an open gaming license for quite some time. Free League has recently been adding a number of their awesome games into what they call their Year Zero engine, which is available for use. 13th Age has a open gaming license, both through the OGL and its own mechanism. Mork Borg, Pathfinder, which is also creating an orc license, and a number of other examples that are out there. So if you have a game that you really love, check and see whether it has an open gaming license. If it isn't one of these, you might even contact them, because sometimes they're a little hard to find and chase down. See whether something like that's available. Otherwise, you may be able to use, you can create for one of these other games, D&D being the most popular. So let's talk about when you have to use a open gaming license. If you watch the last video that I created, it was all about fan content. And fan content lets you, under certain situations, follow a policy, not a license, but a policy, that a company provides for you to use their content in fun ways, such as blogs, streams. So if you watch my streams and there's a small, the artwork in the corner, right? I can do that through fan content and through fair use laws that allow you to use something, because I'm not making money or profiting off of this, or any profit I'm making is so small. Let's say I had enough people to get YouTube ads. It's not much money at all. And so that's permitted. But once we start getting into a paid product, then we're going to be outside of the domain of fan content. If we are locking our content behind, our creation is being locked behind, say, a Patreon, then that is something that can be argued. You can't use fan content for that. You've got to have a different type of license. If we are using the company's intellectual property in a for sale product, copyrighted material, we probably need to use some sort of a license, right? And an open license would allow us to do this. Or if we're working off of copyrighted material. So if I am looking at Dungeons and Dragons and I'm using the rules to create a monster, it can be argued that that may require the use of the open gaming license, because I would look at the material in the SRD and from that have the license by which to create monsters. That can be argued, but it's worth thinking about. It doesn't really matter whether the product is free or not. If it is for a fee, then it drives the fact that you can't use fan content. But you could have a free product that requires the open gaming license because of the nature of how you're distributing it or what is in it. So you can try to push this and see what you can get away with. But I would advocate using a license whenever it's possibly needed. Legal issues can be a big pain, and when you're looking at legal issues, you should really look at the scale and the risk of it, right? So if I create a PDF product that's a $2 product that 20 people download, and Wizards of the Coast says, hey, that is not cool. You really should have used the open gaming license. You need to republish it. I can update the PDF and send those 20 people a new copy, or any future people buying it a new copy. Not hard. But if I've printed 10,000 books and Wizards of the Coast says, hey, you've got to stop providing this, you have to update this to follow the open gaming license, I would have to destroy all the unsold copies at huge cost, right? Financial ruin. So to avoid legal issues, consider your scale and risk, but also consider the fact that you want to be part of a healthy hobby, right? If you're using the Fate SRD, if you're creating content for Fate fans, you should be a Fate fan yourself and want to create a healthy hobby for Fate creators and for Evil Hat, the company behind Fate. So work within the rules that they have, right? The more that you follow those guidelines and err on the side of being respectful of their intellectual property, of their ownership, we'll have a healthier hobby. The last thing to consider here is sometimes you are in a situation where it is better to use the DM's Guild or some other community content program that exists for that RPG. So if I am creating something for, say, Call of Cthulhu, and either they don't have an open gaming license or I would be exceeding it, and I really want to use their intellectual property that's not part of some open agreement, well, then I have the Miskatonic community content program, and I can create for that, and that's a way to do that. In the D&D world, if I want to create a product that is for Eberron, I can't just release that. That setting is their intellectual property, and it's not part of the SRD, but I can publish Eberron as an open world on the DM's Guild. It does have its stipulations, and we'll talk about community content programs some other day, but that is an option, and there are times when it makes more sense to use the DM's Guild versus the others. I should say, I am not a lawyer. I'm giving you friendly advice, not legal advice. Never use anything that I'm saying in one of these videos as the basis for your legal understanding. And if you are at all ever uncertain about your legal standing, or there is a lot of money riding on things, make sure you've consulted a lawyer, hired them to really give you legal advice versus what I am providing here. So yeah, to be clear, nothing that I'm saying here is legal advice. So what are some of the benefits of an open license? There are a number of them. As we just talked about, you avoid legal trouble. You follow this open license, you do what it says, you get to do what it tells you that you get, and that's amazing, and anybody can use it, and that's great. Also, if we are, say, creating a product for D&D or for one of these other programs that has a community content option, we can avoid the limitations of that community content program. So the DM's Guild, for example, you can only sell on the guild. But if I follow the open gaming license, I can now actually sell my product wherever. I don't have to pay the DM's Guild royalties of 50%. I can sell directly from my site on my own website. That's really cool, right? So there are a lot of benefits to the license itself. Depending on the particular license, you may have more or less content to work with as well when you use the license. So we're going to talk about the D&D OGL now, which is by far the most popular open gaming license that's been out there. It actually predates the Creative Commons and agreements like that. It's been around since 2000. So there are two parts to the OGL. The first part is the license. That's the legalese in the document that tells us what we can do and it's fairly easy to understand, but it is written in legal code. Then you have the second part, which is the SRD, or System Resource Document. It's a little bit of a confusing acronym, but what it really means is, hey, here's the stuff you can use. That's the open gaming content, or most of that document is. So it contains in the SRD, the license refers to the SRD, and the SRD is what you can use for D&D to place in products or build off of for your products. The license itself is a 15-section document, and we'll go through that in detail. We'll go through it as a high level and also in detail in this video. The SRD itself is a subset of the overall Dungeons & Dragons rules, and this is going to be true for most games out there. They probably won't give you everything. For one, it means all of the game would be free, and that can be a problem for profit and for sales. But some games do that. Some of the licenses you'll find out there will say the entirety of the game is yours to create from and to copy and emulate. And that's cool when a company chooses to do that. It's also cool when they don't. In the case of D&D, the SRD is a subset because their concept, in addition to holding some things back that they own and sell and so on, is we want to give you enough that you can create your things, create to add to this rather than just regurgitate what we've given you, right? That's their goal. So you can go to the D&D website. This site may change since they have been moving a lot to the D&D Beyond site, but it's always been easy to find this document out there, and any version you can find, you can work off of, right? The open game content is what we're going to talk about next. This is abbreviated as OGC. Open game content is what you find in the SRD document. And it is the portion of their intellectual property that you get to use. That term OGC is very D&D specific, but there may be something very similar in concept, if not in name, that appears in other SRDs, right? They're telling you, here's the part that you can use. And in the D&D license, you can use any portion of that SRD that Wizards has basically declared and designated as their open game content, right? Wizards says, here's the part of D&D you can use. And you can do that too. You can designate in the product that you're creating open game content of your own. That's really cool because it means you can create something, right? Like you create 5 monsters that are really neat and you love them. And you're like, I would like people to use these in their products. And then you can do that. You simply say, this is open game content. And now those monsters can be used in anyone's products. And then we'll discuss how that happens. The other thing you can do, you can use the open game content that others have designated. So if someone else created a whole bunch of neat terrain ideas, I can take those and combine them with my monsters and make really cool encounters. Really important is that you do not gain Wizards of the Coast's trademarks when you use open gaming content and the open gaming license. So you can't, for example, say, hey, this is for the DM, or you can't say, this product is for D&D, official Dungeons and Dragons, nothing like that. You cannot refer to their trademarks, which is why you'll see people say GM in products, even for D&D, or you'll see them refer to a product as being 5e compatible, which is okay. Or they may say, for the world's oldest role-playing game or most popular, that you have to be a little careful with that because Wizards has started to trademark some of those. But so be careful about that, not to use the trademarks that they mention or anything that could be a trademark. You also can't use other intellectual property or copyright sources of theirs. So Elminster is not in the SRD as something you can use. You can't write a product about Elminster and make it an open gaming license product, right? If you want to do something like that, you've got to look at the DM's Guild, right? If you want to create a product for Planescape, when Planescape becomes part of the DM's Guild, that's what you can do that. You can do the DM's Guild. You can't mention a setting like Forgotten Realms or Greyhawk or Dark Sun or any of that outside of the DM's Guild, and only if the DM's Guild permits the setting. All right, so hopefully that makes sense. Let's talk about how to use the OGL, and we're going to look at just 7 steps that really constitute the process you must go through when you use the OGL. First one is download the document, read it, and understand it. And I don't mean just this video, right? This is where you want to make sure that you understand exactly what all these steps are doing. You're familiar with it. You're happy with using it, and it's fine to use. My video, you can also find there are a number of really good resources out there that break down the open gaming license. So Arcane Library has a really nice web page on it. You'll find that Level Up 5e at their A5e site has some really nice breakdowns of how to use the OGL. There are a number of videos and other places that may be helpful. So start by understanding it. Good. Now you know what the OGL is. You know how to use it. Step 2. In your product, you have to add the entirety of the open gaming license. Usually this is done at the end of the product. And so if you look at some product that someone has created using the OGL, you'll see hopefully all of these steps, but at least most of them. And one for sure is the license will be there at the end of the product usually. You could put it in the beginning or somewhere else, but the end usually makes sense because you don't really care if someone looks at it, and they probably don't want to look at it, but it needs to be there for legal reasons. Step 3. Notice of open game content. This is something that's a little weird, but it is mentioned in section 2 of the license. And what it says is that you must, outside of the license that you included, so step 2, we added that license. Outside of that, you must include a statement that says that the open game content that is in your product can only be used under and in terms of this license. You don't have to use this exact wording. I'm just quoting what it says in section 2. So include some statement kind of like this somewhere, probably right before the license kicks in. Okay. So it's just something that says that you are telling the person reading this that any open game content that you use or have created must follow the terms of the license. Okay. So that's all. Just some statement that says that. All right, let's go to step 4. Now you have to designate open game content that you are using from someone else. The license tells you that you have to designate it. How you do that is up to you, but in general, specific is better. So you want to list the elements from any open game content you're using. This includes the SRD that D&D is providing, but also something from someone else's product, right? So if I'm using monsters that are the goblin on the ogre and the ogre from the SRD, I can just say, monsters, goblin, ogre, spells, the fireball spell, whatever it is that I'm using. So just name those open content items. You can, in some cases, refer to like a section, particularly if you were, say, like you're using something from Kobold Press and you are using all of their monsters. You could say something like uses all of the monsters from, or uses the monsters found in Kobold Presses, blah, 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 whatever the name of it is, right? And that would designate what content that is in your product comes from them. But you wanna have that very clear, right? If you have monsters that are yours and monsters from Kobold Press, here's where you need to designate which are theirs and which are yours. The idea is that someone can trace back to the original open content. Cool? Makes sense? If you are not using someone else's open gaming content, like if you're just creating your own monsters based off of the SRD, but they're all yours, then you don't have to follow this step. Step 5 is your own open gaming content. There are a number of ways that you can approach creating a product with regards to open gaming content. So for example, you might say, all of this product is open gaming content. When you get my product, you can use it in your creation. Have at it. Or you might say, none of the material in this product, or no portion of this product, is open gaming content. Or you might decide to have some of it be open gaming content. And I would usually encourage that last option. Be specific around what, unless the answer is all or none, be specific around what you're including, right? It can be a specific section, chapter 2. It can be a category, all of the monsters, all of the magic items, all of the spells, whatever it is. Or you might use some sort of formatting to designate it. There are some companies that do this in quite clever ways, like they might use a certain color text, or it's in a sidebar, or it has a bracket around the outside of the layout, something like that. But when you do this, your open gaming content is now really clear, right? Here are the things in this product that someone else can use and build off of. And that's really important to be specific around what that is, because step 6 is the opposite of that. So step 6 is what is your PI, which is not intellectual property, it's product identity. Similar but different. Product identity are the things in your product that aren't open gaming content and you consider to be things that are yours and your own creations that you identify as being part of your own portion of what is yours. So product identity, you want to designate that as well. And I should say both steps 5, this designation of open gaming content, really 4, 5, and 6. Someone else is designating someone else's open gaming content, your open gaming content, and your product identity are all done outside of that piece. So usually what you do is put up some section called something like licenses in the appendix of your product. Start with this 4, 5, and 6 steps, and then after it, the license itself. Okay. So when it comes to declaring your product identity, these are the things that you want to say are not open gaming content, so there's no confusion. An option is to say anything not identified as open gaming content above, meaning what we did in step 5, is my own product identity, right? But you may want to call it out as well. Your company name, your logo, the artwork in your product, right? That's one that people can easily forget, but you can't say everything in this product is open game content if you have a bunch of artwork that you want to retain the ownership of. Setting names, right? If your world is not a world that you want to give to the entire world to create off of, maybe it is, but if it's not, then you need to put that in product identity. Or again, say not open gaming content. It's everything else is my product identity. NPC names, right? Those are all good. And one thing you can do is you can look actually in the SRD. The SRD has a section where Wizards of the Coast says specifically, our product identity includes but is not limited to the following. And then it names a bunch of like planes of existence and settings and famous personages and monster names, right? So I think the Beholder's in there and things like that. So that it's saying, hey, this is not open gaming content that you can use through the OGL. So you can do the same thing. You can declare the things that you want to not have anyone use. The benefit of declaring it is that you're making it really obvious. So someone reading goes, oh yeah, ooh, I can't use that, right? I can't use the Beholder or whatever your version is. You created some, cool monster that, hops on a single leg and the hopper. And you want to make sure that no one uses the hopper because it's such a clever concept that I just made up. So, that's an example of where if you really want to make sure no one makes a mistake, then naming it makes sense. But if you forget to name something, that could create confusion. So think about your step 5 and step 6, how best to declare that. I'm probably making it sound more confusing than it is or more complicated. It's really look at your creation and decide what you want to share and start from there and state that clearly. So nobody's going to get confused between what you're sharing and what you're not. All right. Last part. In the OGL, that you have copied and pasted into your product, go to section 15 for step 7. Section 15 is a copyright statement that you need to finish populating. It has already the D&D copyright. And you can use that as an example of what you want to do and must do for any open game content you're using. So let's say I'm using Kobold Press monsters. Earlier, I said which monsters I'm using, but here in section 15, I need to add a line that has the copyright statement for Kobold Press for their open gaming content. And to do that, you look in the product that you're getting their information from, and their section 15 will have their information. So copy that, paste it in, you're now covered. If you had 6 different companies worth of D&D creations that you are going to use, you would have 6 copyright statements plus the Wizards of the Coast one in there, right? So a total of 7. Last, you then add yours. Your content also needs to be added in section 15. Some folks skip this, but this is something you need to do. So here you are saying, here is my copyright statement, the name of my product, the complete guide to whatever's, being super cool with your monsters. And my copyright year, whatever the year is that you're publishing this, your name, Teos Abadia, and a URL if that's appropriate. You can potentially add more, but that's what you're being directed to do. And you can look at the example there from Wizards of the Coast or look at a OGL product and see what someone else did for their product. When you have that, you are empowering the next person that uses your open gaming content to do the same process. Just like you can easily pick Kobold Press's piece and paste it in there, they can grab yours, paste it in there, and comply easily in section 7. The truth of this is these steps 1 through 7 do not take a long time, right? Reading and understanding it is probably the longest thing, and copying, pasting, and formatting. And then it's just these little quick statements of open gaming content, designating what you're using from someone else, stating what is your open gaming content versus your product identity, and adding the copyright statement. Hopefully now that you understand these steps, you go, oh yeah, that's really not bad. It's not so hard. So now let's take a look in detail at the sections of the OGL, what it looks like. So to get it, you're going to go to this website, dnd.wizards.com/resources/systems-reference-document. You can just look up D&D SRD and it'll get you to this webpage or wherever they end up putting it if they move their website around. And in this, it'll give you some information, compares the DM's Guild to the OGL. It also includes information on the Creative Commons, which we'll talk about next episode, and it has links to all of the documents, right? There are some FAQs and other information here. Definitely read this the first time you look at it. I'm not going to go over that. I'm going to dive right into the OGL itself. And here it is. So legal information, it gives you permission to do some things. It designates product identity, as you can see right here, right? And we were talking about how it designates its product identity. And then it says everything else in the SRD is open gaming content as described in this definition section of the document, right? But Infinite Layers of the Abyss, can't use that. Red Wizards of Thay, can't use that. But the SRD, go ahead and use anything else in it. And then we find the text that we need to copy and paste into from here on out that we need to paste into our product, right? If we're creating our product, this would go into the end of our product. And the first section is definitions. I'm not going to go in this in great detail, but it just makes sure legally that there is clarity around what they're talking about for any of these things. What does it mean to distribute? What does contributors mean when it talks about the various creators? So you can look at that to familiarize yourself with it. I'm not going to go into great detail, as fun as that would be. All right, so section 2, the license. This is the part that says that the license is for open game content, and there is a notice that will indicate, as I talked about in one of the steps that we're going to follow, I think it was step 2, you have to indicate that the open gaming content can only be used under and in the terms of this license, and you have to put that somewhere there. The other thing it says here that's really interesting is you cannot use other terms with this license, right? So you can't make like other deals with someone and attach those here regarding the open gaming content that's being distributed using this license. The point of this is they're saying like, I can't say to someone, hey, if you use my open game content, you have to promote me. Or you have to, if you use the monsters that I've included in this product, you must give me $5 and film a short YouTube video that says that I'm the best. No, you can't add terms. The terms are the terms, right? So when you create open content, someone can use it. If you don't create open content, then people can't use it, right? Those are the terms. You must follow these terms. Don't modify or add terms. Section 3 is basically saying, if you use this license, you have to follow it. That seems fair. Section 4. In consideration for using this license, Wizards is giving you a perpetual, worldwide, royalty-free, non-exclusive license. That section has been talked about a lot because, Wizards went and tried to change the perpetual, non-exclusive license. They backed off from that, but you never know if they will in the future. So yeah, sometimes the legal words are complicated. It didn't really use, I guess, all the words it could have in saying that it never ever ends. Cross our fingers, hope to die. Cross our heart, hope to die. So anyway, yeah, what it's in theory saying is that if you use this license, you will forever have access to it. And hopefully Wizards continues to agree with that like the rest of us do. Section 5. If you present anything as open content, your creations have to be original. So you can't take, say, the world of Critical Role, Exandria, say it's open gaming content and somehow gain control over it. Like, no, you have to, this is only, anything that you're going to create as open gaming content has to be yours. It can't be someone else's, right? Section 6, the notice of license copyright. So this is the part that tells you that in section 15, you have to modify that to include the actual copyright notice of your game, or of the open gaming license that you are copying from, modifying, or distributing, and you must add their information to the content that you're distributing. So their content must be in the document. You must update your section 15 copyright notice to have that. So section 7 is fairly confusing and a good indication of where I'm not a lawyer. I don't have a legal background. I've only taken a few law classes in my entire life, but I'm not a lawyer. And I have relied upon the interpretations of others in this section. So again, use your own understanding. But what it's really saying here in section 7 is you give up being able to use D&D's product identity, including as an indication of compatibility. And this is what prevents you from saying compatible with D&D on the cover of your product. It means you can't say DM in theory. I think that's legally questionable, but don't trust me, trust your lawyer if you're going to go press that. Don't have to pulp 10,000 copies of a book off of some mistake. So make sure before you're going to fight some fight. But that's what at least Wizards is saying, is you can't use their trademarks. You can't use their product identity here. This also extends to other companies whose open gaming content you use, not just D&D. So it means that, if you're using Kobold Press Monsters, you don't get to say compatible with Kobold Press products. That's probably fine because customers will understand that anyway, but it's just a thing you don't get to do. So that's what section 7 is doing, that you will not use the product identity of anybody who provided open gaming content. You won't use it as a way to kind of claim that your product does certain things, which you may or may not do. Section 8 says if you include open gaming content, you must clearly indicate which parts are open gaming content. So it can't be up to the consumer to guess whether this came from Kobold Press and is open gaming content that you're using in your document, right? And this is obviously, we're looking at the open gaming license, but you will find things like this in someone else's license other than the open gaming license. Section 9 says that Wizards of the Coast can update the license, but you can use any authorized version and distribute the content made under any version, right? It basically comes up to you whether you want to use the latest version they made or use an older one. This is, again, something that came up during the OGL fiasco. Wizards was trying to sort of argue otherwise. It's not clear that they legally can argue otherwise. They themselves have said they can't, so we'll see. But that is what this section says. It says they are free to update it. If they update it, you can use whichever version you prefer. Section 10, you have to include a copy of the license. So that's why we have that step where we paste in the whole document at the end of ours, and we have to paste in this code because that's what it says to do. Section 11, you cannot market or advertise using any contributor name, including Wizards of the Coast, unless you have written permission to do so. So if I had a product that's open gaming content, I don't yet, but I will, you could not say, as endorsed by Teos Abadia, as authorized by Alphastream, or a collaboration with alphastream.org. No, you can't do that because you can't just market based on the open gaming content. You can't go off and talk about, I used Kobold Press Monsters, my product's amazing. No, can't do that. Section 12, if for some reason you can't legally comply with some portion of open gaming content, then you can't use any affected open gaming content. Pretty typical legal provision that's sort of saying if something gets in the way of being used, then you can't use that part. The rest is fine, but remove that. Don't use that portion that's messed up. So if we were using a Kobold Press product, let's not use Kobold Press. If we're using somebody's open gaming content and we find that there was a problem with some of that, one of the monsters is actually not one that they should have included, then you can't use that. It becomes unusable because it was a problematic thing. Section 13, if you made a mistake, you have 30 days to fix it. And if you take longer than 30 days to fix it, you lose the right to use the license. So your product becomes unsellable, it's void, right? It has no right to exist. Can't market it, all that. So don't do that. But you do have 30 days to fix it if somehow by mistake you err. Section 14, if any part of this license is not legally enforceable, that provision can be reformed to what would be permissible, so it can be corrected. And of course, the rest continues to be enforced as written. Very typical legal stuff. Section 15 is their default copyright license, which we talked about in one of the steps. So that's the part that you would actually keep this in the version. And after this, you would add the copyright notices of anything else that you are using open gaming content from, and add yours, right, as we talked earlier. So that's where it happens, right there in that section 15. All right, that's pretty cool. So we got to see that. So let's talk about, why do companies use the open license, right? What is it that makes this like an attractive thing for these companies? And I'd say both to create an open license to begin with and to create OGC, open gaming content. So, why did WotC create the open gaming license in the year 2000 and start all of this really? Well, they did it because their view was, if we do this, we'll create an ecosystem around Dungeons and Dragons, around our RPG, and people will want to create it instead of creating something else. They even had some wording. The original person who kind of came up with the concept was a little worse than that, and almost like, I want to destroy the rest of the industry and prevent any competitors whatsoever. That part has maybe been fairly successful. Outside of that, there are good reasons why companies want to create open gaming licenses: creating community, creating a sense of camaraderie, having a whole bunch of creators that grow up working on your product, in your gaming system, in your rules, that understand it really well, and then become people you can employ, right, is a great reason. Many of the people who work for D&D today are people who used the open gaming license in some way. And a lot of the people that are companies working around the D&D space also began that way and continue to work that way. Somebody like Fate and Evil Hat RPG, or Evil Hat and their Fate RPG, they can do this as well, right? Create an ecosystem. Pelgrane Press, right, can create people who want to create for 13th Age, for their other games, and create an ecosystem around that and a community around that. So there are more products. And one of the things is the scale at which role-playing games companies work is very different than ours, right? So like when Wizards of the Coast makes a book on, say, undead, they're kind of done with the undead subject at the grand scale. Like they have made a book on undead. They can't make like 10 more. Like that would erode profits, right? You can only do so many because when they sell a book, they're selling hundreds of thousands of copies. So they need to think on the scale of what product really pleases hundreds of thousands of people. And then I want to move on to something else. I'm working with fresh ground and getting another hundreds of thousands of copies sold. An individual like myself, I don't care if there's a book on necromancers and undead and stuff. I can make my own particular take on undead, and I might get hundreds of sales, which might be enough for me, or thousands of sales, right? I'm not going to get hundreds of thousands of sales, but I could get thousands. And that could be very well worth doing for me. And that's one of the great things about these open licenses, is that it actually fills the space that a role-playing game company doesn't want to occupy, right? So Free League might say, I want this many, One Ring adventures to exist as official products. That's how many we feel you can really sell. Maybe we're going to make one a year. But other people could maybe make others. And that could create a really cool ecosystem and please a lot of fans and allow for a lot of niche kind of approaches to things. And they can continue selling in their area where they're dedicated. So all of these things are really good reasons to create. And companies often want to create for successful RPGs. So D&D products sell well. So because of that, you see companies that launch Kickstarters with 5th edition compatible products, and they make a lot of money off of those. Similarly, companies want to license their products to encourage this sort of buzz and excitement in the RPG hobby space. But let's talk about some reasons why you wouldn't use the OGL. An easy one is if you don't need to use the OGL, then hey, great, you don't have to use it, right? Like if I can use like for my blog, I'm not selling anything, I can just use fan content policy. Great, no reason to do it. Also, if I'm writing a product that is about the game, but doesn't contain the game, both doesn't contain specific SRD or open gaming content pieces, and also isn't revealing or building upon the mechanics that are in it, then I can safely create that product. So if my product is, for example, a guide on how to be a good dungeon master, or if it's what kind of how to run monsters effectively, how to make your own cool terrain, or alternate takes on I don't know, something like, say, weather tables, right? For different types of worlds, right? For a jungle world, here are the weather tables. If I'm not using D&D's mechanics, I don't need to use the Open Gaming License. And I don't need to follow any of these rules and worry about them if there are ever any issues around them, right? I get all the benefits. I get to make a book that is, compatible with 5e. I still probably shouldn't say, because Wizards doesn't like it, compatible with Dungeons and Dragons, even if I don't use the Open Gaming License. But I can say compatible with 5e, and it can be a very popular product. And it's, a book on cool things to do with weather. And it does not use the Open Gaming License. I have a couple of products on Drive-Thru. They are talking about the game. They do not use the game's pieces. So they don't have to be Open Gaming License products, and I don't have to worry about the OGL at all. So if that is a possibility, awesome. But if you need to use it, you must use it. The last reason to think about why you would not use the Open Gaming License, and this will link into my next video on the Creative Commons, is the Wizards of the Coast OGL fiasco, which is that in January, and even a little earlier, January 2023, and even in December and before that, they were working on possibly getting rid of the OGL. As has been disclosed by some ex-employees, this also happened in 4th edition. They ended up not having, for 4th edition D&D, an SRD, but they also thought about getting rid of the OGL. And that's been really interesting news to see, because it's sort of a recurring theme of D&D wanting to do that, or Wizards of the Coast wanting to do this. So there is that worry that someday the OGL will go away. Now, the good news is, legally speaking, there's broad agreement that if Wizards of the Coast gets rid of the OGL, you can continue to sell anything that uses the OGL today. So if I make a product and it uses the OGL, they can't stop me from selling that, because I sold it under an operating valid license. Right? I didn't do anything on my end to break that agreement. So you can continue to sell any products. What gets into gray areas, could I reprint it? Could I update it for a new version, right? Those things get tough. So again, there are reasons to think about whether the scale at which you're operating on, whether working with the OGL will be problematic. But fortunately, there are other options on how we can work. And that's where it ties into next time, where we're going to talk about the Creative Commons and what process you follow to use the Creative Commons, or CC, when you are creating for Dungeons & Dragons or other systems that use Creative Commons content. So I hope this has been useful. I will see you next time on Success in RPGs.